recapitalized and in better health, but we didn't go that route. We're allowing them to slowly recapitalize by borrowing from the Fed at 0 and lending to the Treasury at 3.5%, and that process is probably halfway through. To even suggest that a dividend is appropriate at this time, I don't know what the hell's in the water where some of these people are coming up with this stuff, but it's the height of absurdity.
Right, so the government's subsidizing the banks who say we now want to pay a dividend for our shareholders, where the government could just use their influence to raise interest rates to give people a genuine return on their savings in a government bond. So they're forcing people to buy the stock of a bank that's been proven to be malicious to get any kind of a return on a dividend payout. And these are banks that are taking money from the government, when the government and the Fed could simply just raise rates and give people a genuine rate on their government bond. So it's a very circuitous way to get people to get any kind of rate of return on their savings by participating in the wholesale thieving, as you point out in your book Bailout Nation and in other books. So once again, it seems like the banks have a gun to the head of policymakers in Washington.
I don't even think they have a gun to their head. That would involve something much more sophisticated. This is simply, you know, you pay your dime, you take your ride on the wheel. We're not a democracy in the United States, at least not the way we used to be. We're now a corporatocracy, and Congress has been thoroughly rented and is now owned by the major banks in the United States and the big Wall Street houses. When you look at the vast amount of lobbying dollars that are spent and the massive campaign contributions, the whole concept of government for the people, by the people, one man, one vote, that's a quaint, ancient notion here in the United States. We are now a government, a representative government that is sold to the highest bidder.
Right, but this gun-to-head aspect, it seems that any time Congress balks at a request from the banks, suddenly there's a crash. We saw this with the Hank Paulson in 2008. We've seen it tied to legislation and some flash crashes that have occurred since then. But if you've got the ability through high-frequency trading and algorithmic trading to direct the market one way or another, if you're trying to coerce the government to do a certain policy and you can crash the market to make your point, that's in a way a financial gun to the head. But you wrote something recently, Barry, about I guess a friend of yours or an associate wrote his take on the current state of climate change, global warming, how this affects investment, and the grown-up version of what's really happening and how we should kind of begin to take this on board in terms of how it affects investing and the future of finance going forward. And of course, your comment boards were flooded with lots and lots of folks who fit into what I call the climate change denial camp. So talk to me a little bit about what you see going forward in this theme, and why is there such resistance by the general public who is experiencing the crazy weather every single day? Why can't they put the pieces together and understand that there's global warming going on and this is causing crazy effects in the investment landscape and the global climate?
Sure. Well, first, the piece was written by Jeremy Grantham of GMO, who the shop is in Boston and London. He's just a very smart, long-standing guy who looks at the world with open eyes and is constantly looking for where are opportunities relative to what's going on in reality. And he sees the change in what's happening with the climate as shifting what's going to be scarce and what's going to be valuable in the future. So he's looking at things like farmland and fresh water and fertilizer and things along those lines. It's not Malthusian. It's not, oh my God, we're going to run out of everything. It's really more of a, hey, everything is changing, and those parts of the world that think that they're very fertile, they may be less fertile in future years and when it comes to agriculture and other products like that. The second part of your question, why the denial by a large percentage of at least the vocal parts of the country. I don't think most people are denying that climate has changed over the past century. If you think back to the 1950s, there was a pretty big movement by the tobacco companies to deny that smoking caused cancer. And they paid people like John Wayne, who, if memory serves, eventually died of lung cancer, and they would pay doctors to do advertisements. When I smoke Lucky's, the healthiest cigarette. There was no real FDA rules back then. There were none of that. And so there was a concerted effort to protect profits by misleading the public. The technical term for that is agnotology. Willfully distorting, changing, raising doubts about stuff that is not in doubt in order to influence policy. The tobacco companies have done it, and now when you see who's behind the global warming deniers, it's essentially big oil is paying for it. And full disclosure, we own a couple of oil companies. We own SunTrust, and we own Synovus and a handful of others. But the bottom line is that there are people who are getting big profits from the current status quo, and they're very, very reluctant to see anything ultimately change.
Right. So, as a matter of fact, the same front groups, the same PR groups, the same political organizations that were behind the pro-smoking propaganda in the 50s were actually brought in to do the climate change denial today. But okay, Barry Ritholtz, the site is ritholtz.com. That's all the time for we have today. Thanks so much again for being on the Keiser Report.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Max. It's always fun talking to you.
All righty. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Barry Ritholtz. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.